as you can probably tell from the title and the thumbnail, I had an interesting couple of months between posting my last video and posting this video. I went to my friend's house up in Sheffield to celebrate their birthday. We were going to go as a group on a walk. And then on the Thursday, the weather started getting really bad. And on the Friday, they issued a yellow weather warning. Not the really super dangerous one, but it was enough that I was like, you know what? No, I'm not going to go on a walk in the countryside with a weather warning. That is a dangerous plan. Let's not do that. So instead, I was going to go have lunch with everyone, and then people who wanted to go on the walk could go on the walk, and I was going to get back on the train and go to the other village where the walk was going to end, meet everybody, and we were all going to have a drink and then get the train home. Lunch was really nice. The weather had been a lot better, actually. It had been kind of sunny and only kind of really light rain. It hadn't been that windy. And everybody else was going on the walk, and it would have been just me who was going to get the train. My friends had been kind of encouraging of like, you can do what you want, but if you want to come with us on the walk, that would be really nice and we'd love your company. So I said, yeah, you know what, the weather's been okay. Maybe the forecast was wrong. Maybe it's not going to be that bad. I'll come on the walk. I would live to regret those words quite quickly. 3/4 of the way through the walk, I had fallen a little bit to the back of the group, which happens pretty often. I walk quite slowly, and I like walking quite slowly. I like being able to see what it is that I'm walking through. I don't see the point in going on a walk for the sake of a walk. If you're going to go at a brisk pace, what's the point? A couple of people had stayed at the back of the group to walk with me, and we were generally just chatting and nattering. But most of the group was further ahead. And we got to a turn in the road where we all turned down this hill to the left. And it was a kind of dog leg. You turned left and you went down the hill, and then at the bottom of the hill you were going to turn right. As I turned right to get back onto the path at the bottom of the hill, I slipped on a very small bit of mud. My right foot went out from underneath me by kind of falling under my body, twisting my foot in under itself. And I couldn't get up, which was, you know, super fun. Not at all worrying. I was in quite a bit of pain and started crying. My friend whose birthday it was came back and was like, what can I do? Are you okay? And I told them to go and get another one of my friends who was on the walk, and just like, I couldn't get up and I needed help. I don't really remember exactly who said what, whether I said that we needed to ring an ambulance or whether somebody else did. At the bottom of the hill there was a house, like one house on its own. So a couple of people went over and tried to see if anybody was home and whether we could use their phone, because it's the countryside, so we didn't have any phone signal. And I don't really know what happened with that bit, because I was like, I had been able to sit up. I couldn't really move. I couldn't lift my leg very well. And I didn't want to move it, because if it was broken, you don't move broken things. That's bad. So I was just kind of sat there crying in quite a lot of pain. And basically as soon as I fell over, the weather got 10 times as bad. And so like we'd been walking and it was like slightly spitting, and I fell. And then it was properly raining. I had a waterproof coat on, and so did quite a few other people, but like it was just quite unpleasant. I was in jeans. I was sat on what was very quickly becoming a damp grass mud patch. There had been a guy in the house, and he'd invited the other people in to come and sit inside in the warm and to use his phone, but it turned out that the path we were on was too narrow for an ambulance. So instead of an ambulance, we had to ring mountain rescue. So I was panicking quite a bit, because in all of this time I wasn't getting a lot of information, and I was kind of convincing myself, partly because I was in shock, I think, that I was making it all up. It didn't hurt that badly. I was just being over dramatic, and I should just get over it, and should just stand up. I didn't try and stand up because I was in a very large amount of pain, but so I was really freaking out, and I was basically half crying because of the pain and half crying because I felt really guilty for needing an ambulance, because if it wasn't broken, then that was kind of in my head, a waste of ambulance time and a waste of money from the NHS to spend sending an ambulance to come and get me, when there are lots of people who need ambulances basically all the time. Never mind the fact that if this had happened to literally anybody in the group that wasn't me, I would have been like, don't be ridiculous. even if it's not broken, you should have it checked by a professional. You need to go to the hospital. They are well equipped to know how quickly to send an ambulance to you or to other people, and if you're not the top priority, they won't send it to you first. But because it was me, and I was freaking out, I was like, I shouldn't be wasting NHS resources. And so my friend was like, well, it's okay, because they're not going to send an ambulance, they're going to send mountain rescue. To which I became even more upset. As you can tell, I am a terrible, terrible patient. I couldn't see them because they all kind of arrived behind me, but apparently they kind of just descended on this, like, bottom of a hill in a swarm. Like, first there were 2 of them, and then suddenly there were, like, 20 of them. I figured that they would have, like, an ambulance stretcher where you lift and it's basically plastic, but apparently, because it's mountain rescue, the way that they work is they have this big wheel, and you get put on this bed, and then the bed is strapped to 8 people, like 2 at the bottom, 2 at the top, and 2 on each side, who balance the weight equally, and then most of your weight is actually on the wheel, and they're just there to keep you balanced. I didn't get to see it. I don't know what the wheel looked like. Wheeled me effectively back up the hill that we'd walked down to wait for an ambulance. We ended up waiting for the ambulance in this kind of barn thing, and I will put some photos of me waiting in this weird stretcher thing. By this point, the shock had worn to the point where everything was just really funny. So, like, I was just lying there in the middle of this barn, in the middle of the countryside. I had no idea where anybody else was. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know if my leg was broken. I was giggling a lot. I found it really, really funny. The paramedics in the ambulance were great, and the nurses in A&E were wonderful. And quite quickly I got checked into A&E and sent to X-ray and had my X-rays done. Here is where it starts to get a little bit not great. I had my X-rays done, and then they were really obviously quite busy. Like, it was effectively a Saturday evening now. Like, we were heading into hellish nightmare times for A&E. I got put into this room that had a whole bunch of bays in it, but because all 6 of those were being used, I was just put right in the middle of the room instead, which was fine. Like, there's not enough space in hospitals, and that's a problem, but I'm not going to complain about it. There was nothing that, like, hospital staff right then and there could do. But what did feel really weird was the doctor came over to me and was like, right, Sophie, we're going to put a cast on your broken ankle. And I was like, hang on, what? I've just come back from the X-rays. You haven't actually told me, you haven't diagnosed me with a break. You're just telling me a treatment plan. I understand that hospitals and doctors try and do things in a way that means that you're less scared as a patient. But actually, for me, and I think for a lot of people, learning information only when they think it's super necessary is actually quite distressing. Like, it's my body and it's my injury. So I kind of had to bring him back and be like, hang on, wait, where is the break? What has happened? And apparently I had broken the fibula, which is the support bone in your ankle, which was better than breaking the main one. It's a shorter recovery time. But so they were like, okay, we're just going to put you in a plaster cast. Off you go. So then I think this guy was a nurse practitioner, but he may have been a healthcare assistant. I think he was a nurse practitioner, but I'm not 100% sure, and this was like nearly 2 months ago now. He was lovely. He was really, really nice. And they needed to cut my jeans so that they could put a cast around 3/4 of my leg. They weren't going to put it all the way round my calf and my ankle, because 2 things can happen if you cast it all the way around. The first is that if the swelling goes down, then the cast is really loose because it's not properly fitted to where your leg is. And if your swelling increases, then that can really fuck with your blood circulation, because there's, like, casts are really hard, and so they'll put pressure on your circulation if the swelling gets bigger than the size of the cast. So instead of casting the whole of my leg, they were just going to cast the sides and the bottom so that I was still having some support from the cast, but I wasn't, like, in danger of injuring myself further. It didn't mean that I couldn't put any weight on it. In order to put the cast on, they needed to cut my jeans so that I could then take my jeans off when I went home. They were just going to cut straight up the fabric, and me and my friend were like, actually, can we do it? And can we cut up the seam, like, along the thread and not damage the fabric, because then when I get home I can, like, sew them back together and not lose a pair of jeans, because jeans are quite expensive. a doctor came over and was like, did not introduce himself, didn't tell me what his name was, like, was very bad at the kind of human aspect, which a lot of doctors are. Basically asked me a whole bunch of questions about risks to blood pressure. All of my answers to this were no. Like, did I have a history of deep vein thrombosis? No. He was like, well, you are still at risk. And it turns out the one risk that I have is being fat. What's supposed to happen is if someone ticks 2 of the boxes on that questionnaire, they're supposed to be prescribed blood thinners, because having a large body part, like a leg, in a cast and not being able to move it properly increases your chance of having a blockage in an artery. But I didn't tick 2 of them, I ticked 1. I ticked one thing, which also, like, there is debate around whether it's actually an increased risk just being fat. They said, okay, well, we're just going to be on the safe side and we're going to prescribe you some blood thinners. And I said, okay, fine, because I figured it was just going to be a prescription. And then they said, okay, so we need to take blood in order to do that. I am a very bad person to take blood from. My veins are shit. My veins in my inside of my arms are shit. In the insides of my wrists are not great. In the back of my hand, they're still not good. The only place that I have really good veins is on the tops of my feet. And you're not allowed to take blood from there unless you're a doctor. I said, do you have to do this? Do you have to take my blood? It's going to hurt me. It's going to be a lot of work. And they said yes. And so I think it took them 5 attempts. And then eventually, after trying like 3 different times on the inside of my wrists, he like went down to a smaller needle, which meant it had to be in for a longer time, but did work. So I think I might from now on kind of be like, you will need the small needle. Not that that will mean that they listen, because I tell them that I need the large blood pressure cuff every single time, and 8 times out of 10 they ignore me and try it with the medium one, and I'm like, no, you're gonna need the largest one. It's gonna be an hour to run the blood tests and then prescribe you. And at this point it was like 7:30, I think. And so then I was wheeled into this room, and 2.5 hours later I was getting really, really frustrated and bored, and no one had told us anything again. We'd kind of just been dumped in this room and no one had said anything at all. And every time we asked, like, I was brought up by a nurse. You don't question nurses. They're very overworked, they're very underpaid, they've got a lot going on. I am incapable of being not really nice to a nurse. The nurses at this hospital really tried to push me. I waited an hour and a half before I asked anything. And I think even then what I said was, do you have any idea what's happening? I was told it would be an hour's wait. Do you know how long it will be? I want to be very polite to nurses, but also I couldn't get up and go and ask them. The nurses didn't come over to my bed at any point that I was in there. I was sitting halfway across the room. I couldn't see anybody else. No one had told me their name. And I had no way of communicating with anybody. So my friend Clay was with me. It wasn't fair to go and send them and be like, can you go and get a nurse? Because I wanted to be able to ask in a very convenient fashion for the nurses. I just wanted to know what was happening, because I wanted to go home. Or at least as home as I could go, considering that I was in Sheffield. An hour and a half later, during which time me and my friend had to talk a woman in the cubicle next to us down from a panic attack, because the nurses weren't doing anything and she was getting really, really stressed because the room was locked and you could only get out with a key fob. And during which time I had to go to the bathroom, and a very, very grumpy nurse had been cross with me for needing to go to the toilet because it was such an inconvenience for her. So I think it was 10:15 when they finally came by and said, we're going to prescribe things. Then we had to faff around for half an hour, 45 minutes, because the same very grumpy nurse flatly denied me crutches. Didn't explain why I wasn't allowed crutches, but just said, you won't be able to cope with them. Again, I understand that in hospitals you're trained to do the thing where you only give people information that they absolutely need. It would make me, and I think a lot of other people, feel far more comfortable if I could know what I am allowed to do with real information. Like, why would I not manage? What bit of it is difficult? But I didn't get told that. I was just told, you won't manage. And instead given a Zimmer frame. In and of itself was still quite difficult. Finally got released at like 10:30. Made it back to my friend's house for 11, where their birthday party was still happening. Trying to move from the curb into their house was very difficult because they have a very long kind of walkway, didn't have a wheelie chair, and the hospitals don't release you with a wheelchair. So I was trying to walk down an uneven slab stone pathway with one foot in a Zimmer frame. It was bad and not fun and very, very painful. I had rung my mum and kind of said, I have broken my ankle, can you come and get me? Realistically, I knew I wasn't going to be able to stay in Sheffield, but I also knew I wasn't going to be able to look after myself in London, at least not to start with. However, my parents run a pub and a Sunday is like their busiest day, which meant that my mum couldn't come and get me until after they were done with food service at 9 o'clock. Drive up from Grantham to Sheffield, which is about an hour and a half drive. And then the car wouldn't start, because of course. And so then we had to be jump started by the AA. All the while I'm waiting on the street in my pyjama shorts on a wheelie chair. Fast forward by a couple of days and I have been brought home. I was told by the Sheffield hospital, as soon as I could really, I needed to self-report to an A&E at my local hospital, take the cast off and fit me with a boot and do another x-ray. So we rang in advance to Grantham Hospital and they said, yes, come down, come straight to the fracture clinic. We went straight to the fracture clinic and they said, you have to book in advance, you can't come straight here, report to A&E. Spent another hour waiting around in A&E. We got a consultant who didn't even look at my leg. He just asked what happened and booked me in for an appointment at the fracture clinic a week and a half later. This was already 3-4 days after I'd broken it, and the plaster cast that was only on 3 sides was really starting to fall apart, like it was falling down my leg. Bits of the plaster had weakened to the point where it wasn't solid anymore. It needed to come off. So instead we went to Nottingham Hospital and they were much better. I did another round of x-rays, they took the cast off and they gave me a lovely, lovely boot. Look, isn't it nice? It looks a little bit like a Cyberman leg. It's a removable boot, it's got plastic underneath and on the sides, and then it's padded and velcroed around it. Forces your ankle into a kind of 90-degree angle so that you can't put weight on your ankle at an angle that is likely to shift the bone. They told me to wear it for a week and then come back and have another round of x-rays, and if everything had stayed where it was, then I could keep it for a month and then take the boot off. And if things had moved, then I would need surgery. Thankfully, nothing moved. And I was able to just keep the boot on for another month. They told me to take it off whenever I wanted to, but I couldn't put weight on my leg unless I had the boot on. And I also couldn't get the boot wet, which made showering basically into an Olympic sport. After a month we went back and they took the boot off, gave me some exercises and said that I should try and do those 2 or 3 times a day and that I could take the boot off as and when I wanted to and slowly get used to it without the boot. My ankle still hurts. Climbing up and down stairs is quite difficult and long periods of walking are quite hard. I haven't used the muscles in my lower leg in almost 2 months, so it's been quite painful trying to get them back into how they were. It's also done some weird things with my recovery. So while I was getting better, I had really quite a lot of brain fog, which hasn't completely gone away. There were several instances where I tried to talk to someone or introduce someone to someone and I completely forgot their name. There was one point where I was talking about someone who I've known for 3 years and I could not remember his name for 15 minutes. It wasn't there. It didn't exist in my brain. It's also had an effect on the actual physicality of my leg because of muscle wastage. So if you don't use a muscle, and not like you don't exercise, but like you don't use it, the muscle wastes away. So my right leg looked dramatically smaller than my left leg, which was really quite disturbing and did not fun things to my brain. But now that I'm walking again, it's getting better and back to normal and back to its proper size. But it was just really quite strange. It's so weird doing this again. Is there a point where it stops being weird when you do a video for the first time again? I'd like that to be a thing, please. Next week's video is going to be a discussion of Endgame, so make sure you've watched Endgame by the end of next week. I have many thoughts, and I will see you next week. Bye.